Good evening. I'm just going to give a minute for people to come in. You will notice as you trickle in here, a little poll pop up. We'll have one at the beginning, one at the end. Should just take a moment. And like I said, we'll get started here in just a minute. We're going to slowly get started here. My name is Tal Kitron with Applerouth Tutoring Services. I've been with this company for over 10 years now, working in a few different capacities, but right now I just work as a tutor, mostly doing online SAT, PSAT, ACT prep, and then some executive function coaching. Today, we're going to talk about the digital SAT and specifically the verbal modules, question types, strategies, just how to approach. We're booked for an hour, but I can't imagine it'll take that long. So I will make sure to leave some time at the end for questions. And yeah, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get going. My goal is to help those of you taking the May SAT or an SAT down the road know what to expect, but then also how to attack each part of the SAT verbal. That's our goal for today. So we'll talk about the format, including timing, but also content of the digital SAT verbal modules. That's sections 1 and 2 on every SAT. Like I said, we'll look at the question types, so the content, topics, but also major strategies to attack each question type. And those will be techniques you can immediately apply on a practice or official SAT. So the structure is similar to how it used to be, but there are some major changes. The scoring is still at a 1600. So the best you can get on verbal is a perfect 800. And that comes from both of the first two sections. The first module, module 1, is going to be a set form in that it'll be just kind of not too difficult, not too easy, just kind of a basic form for everyone to take. Based on how you as a test taker perform, so let's say you get almost every question right on module 1, then module 2 would be the upper level. It'll be harder, and therefore your score will be higher. If, on the other hand, you don't perform that well on module 1 and you miss, 20, 30% of the questions, they'll probably put you into lower level module 2. In that case, it'll all be easier, but we don't want that, right? We want it to be harder so that our score floor and ceiling are both much higher. So this is kind of one of the trickiest things to understand. And what it means, though, is that module 1 is more important than module 2, flat out. Right? If you miss 10 questions on module 1, you can't really get above a 500 out of 800. Whereas if you miss 3 or 4 questions, you're going to be in the upper level, right? Your score is going to be at least a 550. And we will talk more about that, but it's new. It's a bit confusing, the adaptive nature of section 2. So a little bit more on that. As I mentioned, the second module will adapt only one of 2 ways. Either on average, it's all going to be easier, so the lower level module, or harder. And as I mentioned, earlier questions can affect scores more than later ones. So that doesn't mean like something in module 2, like question 3 is worth more than question 20, but all the questions on module 1 are worth more, period, than all the questions in module 2. And again, you can't really think about this as you go, but if you're finding module 2 super easy, it probably means we just didn't make it at the upper level, and we don't want that. So then that means as a student preparing for the SAT, you really recalibrate and really work hard on the basic level module 1 first to make sure you're getting into the upper level for section 2. Remember, these are not question adaptive. So let's say you nail the first 10 questions on module 1. That's not going to change anything for the rest of that section. Right? It's only if you do well on module 1, then module 2 will change accordingly. The basics of the new verbal is students get more time per question. So not like luxurious, you can spend 5 minutes per question, but it's not like, a 10-second time crunch. Used to be reading and then writing were separate. So there was like a comprehension section and then grammar stuff, but now they're combined. And they test fewer grammatical concepts, whereas they used to test parallel structure and pronouns and some prepositions, right? Idiomatic phrasing. They don't do that a whole lot anymore. So we'll talk about what grammar topics they do test, mainly punctuation and clauses. And then what you'll see on the verbal is short passages. So the longest passage is going to be like 2 paragraphs. And they cover a pretty wide range of topics, right? But I think the key will be generally the answer choices and coveting those rather than the passage or question itself. So last slide on format, then we're just going to get into questions and strategies, which is kind of the name of the game today. Verbal is 32 minutes for 27 questions. 32 minutes, 27 questions, all multiple choice. That is, interestingly, even though you get more time for math and there are fewer questions, if people struggle for time on the SAT, it is usually on module 2 of verbal. And we'll talk about ways to skip around and try to preserve time and momentum and energy along the way. But 32 minutes, 27 questions. That just means you can't take like 3 minutes on a question. That's too long. And just so you know, about the total time is 2 hours and 24 minutes. So a little over half of that is dedicated to those first 2 modules, verbal. So we're always going to start with about 1 hour and 10 minutes of verbal work. These strategies apply both to verbal and math, but of course today we're focusing on just sections 1 and 2. I used to have to tutor a lot about active reading, and I still do for the ACT. So active reading is if you've got a paper test booklet, pencil in hand, starring, underlining, highlighting, taking notes. That's something that you can't really do on a computer. It's digital, but there are highlighter tools that we're going to look at. You can actively engage with the text and the answer choices. So on like that third block here, you see you have access to the highlighter, but also an answer eliminator. I would use that a lot, especially on like vocab questions. And then you may run out of time. That's not the end of the world, but leave nothing blank, right? There's no points off for wrong answers. So if you're running out of time, just bubble in C or whatever your favorite choice is, but pick the same answer each time. Meaning that if you go like, let's say you have 5 questions left and you just have to guess. If you go A, B, C, D, A, you will probably miss them all. But if you go A, or B, 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 you're probably going to get 1 or 2 of them right, just statistically. All right, so that's just good test taking strategy on either section. And now let's get into like the format and the question types. Average time per question is a little over a minute, but there are going to be certain questions that are like 20 seconds and others that take a couple minutes. Your job as a test taker and my job as a tutor generally is to help students develop their internal clock so that we do little timing drills and you can say, all right, I'm taking too long. I'm better off skipping this and coming back later. The SAT a couple years ago, the paper test was 4 long passages, 10 questions each, what the ACT has right now. But now that's not the case anymore. Every short passage, which will be like a paragraph, maximum 2, will have just 1 question attached. We're not spending much time with each piece of information. And you can see that right there. These are vocab questions, but short passages, 1 question per passage. That is always, always what we're going to expect. This is our most important slide so far, so I'm going to leave it up for a while, and we're also going to revisit it at the end. And if you do have questions as we go today, do put them in the Q&A. We'll get to those at the end. But the reason I put this here is because it is very, very, very important, no matter what test you are taking, to know what to expect. If you are prepared for that and you know exactly what's coming, you won't be taken by surprise on test day. You can be more poised and confident and comfortable throughout. On that note, the first 4 questions are going to be the first type we look at, vocab and context. So it will always start with vocab. You don't have to start with them, but I would say a vast majority of test takers will. So first 4 questions, vocab, and then you're going to notice a switch. The middle of each section, about 5 through 15 or 16-ish, is going to be the longer question types. That's command of evidence. We'll talk about that. Inference, structure and purpose, main idea, and then a cross-text connection question, 1 per section. Those are longer. There's a paragraph and then some answers that are a little bit longer. Those are always in the middle. So if you find yourself getting bogged down, which many students do, right? You're losing time, energy, confidence, momentum in the middle of the section, skip forward. We must get to the grammar and the connectors and the rhetoric, right? Because grammar questions, we'll notice, are just like, hey, it's verb tense. I'm in the past. That's going to be pretty quick, right? And even the hardest ones, even if we miss them, they'll be relatively fast, right? So getting to that 16 to 27 range, especially on module 2 upper level, can't emphasize enough how important that is. All right, so just knowing where everything is going to be very important. And now we're going to look at each of these question types and how we attack, understanding that on test day, you do not need to go in this order. Here's what you're going to see, and I will pull up also like the Blue Book app itself, but the way that students take the SAT and PSAT in 2025 is on the computer digitally via the Blue Book app. So just about everyone probably has this either on their device or their school computer because, like I said, PSAT is how we've been taking it the last couple of years. Look at all the tools we've got. So up top, you've got the time. Some people hide it, most don't. That'll just start to kind of tick down. Top right, you've got annotate, which my students who have extra time accommodations definitely use it a lot. I think it's helpful for certain question types to highlight connectors or main ideas. So you can play with the highlighting. It's just I'll show you in a minute, but we'll select something and it'll give you a choice of color. But the most important by far is going to be that answer eliminator. So that part, the ABC with the slash on the top right. You can always keep it engaged. So I can have it engaged and eliminate A and C and then pick an answer. You don't have to like disengage it. And then if you click the ABC answer eliminator, it will also automatically be engaged on the next question. So I would have it always just kind of in play. And then finally, mark for review. So that's when we're struggling or we just don't know or we need to move on, but we want to come back. If you hit that mark for review flag by the number 1, then later, if you hit the black question 1 of 27 on the bottom, that'll pull up a list of all the questions, including ones you've marked for review. So this is what we're looking at and dealing with. Again, the digital SAT is good with accommodations. So like for students with dyslexia or processing, or other LDs, there are certain accommodations, whether that's zooming in or color coding and stuff like that. So look into accommodations if you receive them in school. You want to make sure you apply for those on the SAT. All right, vocab and context, questions 1 through 4. This is the heart of the presentation, and the most important stuff is just what do you do for each question type? And my recommendation on these partially is from the Applerouth book, which is a great book, and partially just from my years of experience as a tutor, right? What works well. This is clearly a vocab question. We could tell based on where it is in the test, but also the answer choices in the question itself. Our job is to complete the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase. As a test taker, especially for the harder questions, I recommend this 4-step strategy. Number 1, black out the choices. Ignore them. Do not let them cloud your judgment. Number 2, read the passage and predict a word or phrase of your own. Sometimes that's hard and you can just do like a negative, positive, or get the vibe of the word, and that could be enough. And then once you've predicted the word or tried to eliminate the worst choices that do not match, and then there could be words we don't know, or it might just be uncertain, so you plug in remaining choices and pick the one you like. Here, the way that would work. Frustrated with the blank of existing terms, so I know it's something negative. This author coined the term African futurism to describe the genre of science fiction that is rooted in African experiences and perspectives, and that focuses on what is and can or will be rather than what could have been. So he's frustrated with something. That means I need a negative word, which means it is not A and it is not C. And then I'd look at limitations versus obscurity, right? Just to see which one works. Obscurity meaning like kind of strange or not very common, right? Or easy to find. I don't think that works as well as limitations of existing terms. Because of that, this person coined a new term. That's vocab and context. And again, you'll just see it 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's going to switch to questions like this. And this is where a lot of my students are like, oh my gosh, 17th century poem. No, right? It's short. The question is short. The passage is short, but this will be considerably harder, I'd say, for most of my students. The job for the longer questions, again, questions 5 through 15 or 16-ish, is different, right? So here you read the question itself, and that'll be unique. Which quotation effectively illustrates the claim? Then we're going to have to read the passage on the left to figure out what is the claim. So The Spring is a poem by Thomas Carew. In the poem, the speaker compares the changes in the season to the attitude of his beloved. So we've got to see an answer that compares seasonal changes to a person's attitude. We'll go down the list with all these very 1600s, flowery language. The worst answers here are probably B and C, simply because they don't really reference a person. Choice B is talking about frost and lakes and grass and streams. Choice C is talking about birds and bees and trees, but nothing about a person or their attitude. So I'd say not B, not C is how I would go first. That's step 3 there, eliminating those choices. And then your job for a correct answer here, it's not like math where I can prove it. It's these basement dwelling test writers who write test questions all day, every day. Their job is to write a question and then a correct answer. And then they write 3 choices to try to fool us. So we want an answer that's just, well, there's nothing wrong about it. I can't argue with it. It's technically true. That's the best we can ever get on a question like this. Between A and D on this question, just so you know, the answer is D. Because even though they both say her, a possessive female pronoun, A is saying the earth hath lost her snow white robes. It just sounds like they're personifying the earth and there's no more snow. Whereas D seems like we're talking about sun, and even nice sunlight cannot melt this ice queen's, I don't know, hatred or sternness. So D is in dog, but this is a much harder question. And if you get down to A and D, then that's a good sign. That means your process is working for us. These are also, in my opinion, some of the toughest inference questions, where when we infer, we do not want to make big logical leaps or assumptions. The answer will still probably be in the passage, but it might be a tiny bit of a leap, like not like perfect evidence like we often see. Notice the strategy for every long question in the middle is about the same. Read the question, read the passage, eliminate the worst answers, and then pick your favorite or least wrong. Elimination is really the key because those of us who gravitate towards the best answer will often get fooled by the test writers. But if you can say, oh, here's why these 3 are wrong, we can be very certain our answer is right. Well, I'll just leave this up for a second if people want to try it. So I think this one another fairly tricky question, but I'd focus in on connector words like where it says however. In this case, you don't want to pick A. It's not about appealing to consumers. And I would say the other one that I'm not sure is C. I'm not necessarily worried about being adopted by the paper pulp industry. It seems like they can recycle these bio-based foams. So the question is, are they, like they said up top, like polyurethanes, durable, versatile? And so I want an answer that kind of talks about that, and B is the perfect match, right? So it's an inference, but not really. The question is, are the foams as varied and durable as polyurethane foams? They're recyclable, but are they workable in seat cushions and furniture? But again, I'd say if you can cross out words in each of these wrong answers, that's probably how to get to the best. These questions are actually last. So rhetorical synthesis bullet point questions will always come from about 24, 25 to about 27. And these tend to be some of the easiest. They've started to make them a tiny bit trickier, but the general rule is ignore the bullet points completely. So for 70, 80% of these questions, you do not need the bullet points at all. We always start with just reading the question. Here, the student wants to introduce the research of Aubrey and Schmidt to an audience already familiar with global warming. So then you just go straight to the choices and eliminate ones that don't do that. Right? Like A and D don't introduce research of these people. Bad answers. Then if B and C were both tempting, step 4 is go back to the bullet points if you need to determine which one is accurate. But here, I don't think B really introduces the research at all. They're just saying a strategy to combat global warming. I think C is a much better answer, more thorough. So these questions are generally quick. That's why you have to get there with time to spare. Have to. And then the stuff that I would say also you have to get to with plenty of time to spare is the grammar stuff. That's from about 17 to about 24 if we include connectors. This is something I spend a ton of time on with students. People don't learn them very well. They forget it all the time. So I recommend before the May SAT, if you're taking it, really look at punctuation rules. An independent clause can stand alone. I made a sandwich. A dependent clause cannot. So that first rule is that commas can separate dependent and independent or separate ideas in a list. The one thing commas can't separate is what periods do, which is 2 full sentences, 2 independent clauses. She prepared for the test. She studied hard. A comma would be inappropriate there. And then another good rule is, with one exception on this test, periods and semicolons are the same. That means they are both ending full sentences and beginning new full sentences. They separate independent clause. That means if a period and semicolon are both answer choices, it's very likely that they're both wrong because they're identical. And then finally, the colon, 2 dots. People aren't very confident with it. The test writers know this, which is why it's often a correct answer. A colon is an introduction. Think of it as a drum roll. So you have to have a full independent clause before. I had one great passion in life. Drum roll, please. What was it? Then the colon introduces it. Do not associate colons with lists because they'll trick you with that. Just remember the rule is got to have a full sentence before, and it's got to be a drum roll introduction. But I mean, I could go on for a long time on clauses and punctuation rules because of the grammar questions. A solid 30, 40% will probably be just testing this stuff. There's a very different approach to these, though, and it's a reason to get there early and with plenty of time to spare. We go to the answer choices first. The question will always be the same, which choice, blah, blah. Go straight to the answer choices. This is testing punctuation. It's very obvious. Based on what's changing from A to B to C to D. Then I'm already thinking it's not A or B because they're identical in most cases, but I'll read the short passage, eliminate the answers that don't work, and then we pick a choice that doesn't violate any rules. So here, this person also dedicated herself to mycology, the study of fungi, producing more than 350 paintings. We can't go straight through with no pause. It's separate ideas. So C doesn't work, but A and B won't work because the second clause after the period or semicolon would be dependent. So here it'd be choice D, semicolon period don't work, but we need the comma. For any grammar question, if you use this 4-step process, choices first to determine what they're testing, and then elimination. That's how we get the right answer more often than not. The other topics you'll see, and like this is it, very much finite. Verb tense, that's just past, present, future stuff. Subject verb agreement. I think we'll try to see one of those. You can see there's a shortcut for those. Misplaced modifier or parallelism and comparison. So that'd be, they give you 4 different sentences with the same words, but they're moving around. So you figure out based on what isn't underlined, what we need to start with, what our subject is. Possession rules, so apostrophe S, S apostrophe, its versus its. And then when It comes to punctuation clauses. Sometimes it's not clear and there's just like some verbs, including an ing verb and a present tense verb. You have to be very, very careful with some of those harder questions because it's unclear what they're testing and you just got to notice, oh, wait, there's another verb later. So I need a fragment maker, an ing verb, for example. And again, you have to get to these. So even if that means going like do the first 5 questions and then skip here, I recommend that honestly for most of my students. 1 through 5, and then 15 through 27, and then the middle questions. And the one that we didn't address, these will come from about questions 23 to 24 or 25. So it's grammar, but specifically there will be at least 2 or 3 connector questions per section. So 5 or 6 per test. Just like grammar, answer choices first. Read the passage to decide, are these ideas contrasting or not? Eliminate the answers that don't work, and then pick the one that works logically, but also grammatically. This one is talking about adaptations to ensure survival, and then it gives an example of tadpole shrimp who do that. So this would be B. There's no contrast, so it can't be A or C. And these questions, again, they come up a lot, and students tend to do well. I would say you just got to be careful if there's like 3 or 4 of them, there's going to be one of those 3 or 4 that's intentionally tricky. This falls under command of evidence, but the one other thing you would see in the middle of an SAT verbal module is a graph question. Some people love them, some people hate them. Sometimes 3 of the choices are just false, but a lot of times, especially on upper level module 2, they'll all be true, but we need to pick the one that's actually logically completing a sentence or makes sense in context. For these, kind of counterintuitive, you don't look at the graph until kind of the end. So I recommend start with the question, read the passage to figure out what the student's conclusion is, evaluate choices by referring to the graph. So I'd look at A and see, okay, is that true? And then is it relevant? And then I pick the choice that is both true and relevant. This is actually kind of a tough one. I'll leave it up for a second. Well, I think the way I want to look at this is if the conclusion is that the reduction in population in the enclosure with lizards was entirely because of the lizards, well, I don't really care about day 1, and I don't really care about the largest decline from day 1 to day 10. A and C to me are the 2 not as good answers. And then D is true, but honestly wouldn't weaken the conclusion. I think B is our answer because if it declined in the enclosure without lizards, that means there's some other reason for the spiders dying. Not just the lizards, but another reason as well. So B is in boy for this one. But again, we did that kind of quickly. So a little recap, and then I think maybe briefly look at Blue Book, but we're kind of coming to the end today because that's all the verbal section is, over and over the same question types. So very comparable. Answer what the question is asking. Always look at what we're solving for. That's true on any test question, whether it's math or verbal. Pay attention to little words, contrast words, or detail. Leave nothing blank. No points off for wrong answers. May as well guess at least. Consider, as we talked about, strategically skipping around. Grab the easiest points for you, mark for review if you need to, and go back. And then really on verbal, don't forget the answer eliminator. Highlighter can be great, but the answer eliminator even more crucial. And so just one quick revisitation of the structure. With the bold 16 through 27, again, I'll just say it, like if you take nothing else from today, I hope you take more, but especially on module 2 upper level, get to these. So I have my students, a lot of times they'll do the vocab and then they'll see a few tough ones. And as soon as you kind of hit a wall in the middle of the, the 5 to 10 range, jump to 16, right? Nail these questions, get as many of them right in as little time as you can, and then come back and dig into the stuff in the middle. Right. And again, every single SAT verbal module will look like this. Grammar might start on like 15 or 14 or 17, but it's like very much right in this range. And so I'm going to pull up like the Blue Book app just very briefly to show you guys a couple things, but how to practice for the SAT. So obviously, of course, when I was in high school, I didn't realize tutoring was a thing. I wish I had. That's a great way to learn. But you can also do a ton individually. So there are 4 Applerouth SATs, digital, with the very similar platform. And the great thing about those is when you're done and submit, it gives you a detailed score report, questions you missed, right, and what type they were and where. Then the single best resource would be the 7 Blue Book digital SATs. They also have some PSATs, but the 7 digital SATs would be the #1 most important way to practice. And so last thing before I open up for questions is I'm going to open up the Blue Book app and just going to very briefly show you guys kind of how this works in action with a couple of questions. And then we'll call it a day. This always just takes a moment to load. And as you'll know, if you've had any experience with Blue Book or College Board, it's very, very secure, stupidly secure, as if people really want to steal your SAT info. Okay. So this is the educator like version. So you'll actually see, when you log in here, you'll see 7 tests, including ones you've done. But just a quick look at what the Blue Book app actually looks like, which is this, right? It's a test preview. You can see the time ticking down up there. Mark for review, as I mentioned. That's the black button. Then I can if I go to question 6 and later want to come back to 1, I can see, oh yeah, I marked that one. And then answer eliminator, right? That's the #1 thing, right? So here, if we just tried this, in recommending Baofi's collection Song I Sing, a librarian noted that pieces by the spoken word poet don't lose their blank nature when printed. So something positive. And then colon, it says the English has the same pleasant musical quality on the page as it does when performed. And a word that means like pleasant. So not jarring and not scholarly. And then personal, I don't see enough evidence for. And so melodic, sweet sounding, pleasant musical quality, right? We pick it, you're pretty confident, and move on. Here you see some of those longer questions, right? That kind of give you every type. And then graph questions where we said you go question, passage, choices, graph. And then we'll just do 7 and 8 and open it up for questions. So this one, I want you to look at answer choices first. And the way to do this question is actually go straight to choice C, because semicolons and periods are easier than the other punctuation marks. So we just test, is this right? According to Naomi Nakayama of the University of Edinburgh, the reason seeds from a dying dandelion appear to float in the air while falling, period? I don't think so. So actually right away, we can tell that it is not C, that violates a grammar rule, because that's not a full sentence before. And we actually can't pick B because we also did a full sentence before a colon. And so then it's just, can I get away with no pause? The reason seeds from a dying dandelion appear to float in the air while falling is that their porous plumes enhance drag. I think that's our answer. You can't really pause between falling and is. So this is tough, but no pause is good. And if you can get away with no stop, we often want that. And the last question for the evening is a bullet point question. Our job is the student wants to emphasize a similarity. Okay, well, we're going to block out these bullets because we probably don't need them. Choice A says, however, So I don't think that's a similarity. This only mentions one work. Like many of his sculptures, these both include discarded objects. I mean, perfect. And then D says 08, 09, those are different years. So I mean, that's that really. That's the SAT verbal. Bring it back to the slideshow. My recommendations again are going to be these practice tests. Applerouth's book, Unbiased, is amazing. You can get it even without purchasing tutoring. You can buy like the Applerouth guide a la carte. But again, digital practice, review, name of the game. Let's open it up for questions. I've seen one already. If you, we're also going to launch one more quick poll here. If you don't have any questions, hopefully you got what you needed out of this. Feel free to call it an evening. But I'm just going to open it up and answer questions as they come in. You'll see that poll pop up. The first question is how many graph questions are on each module, and it's not always the same, but graph questions fall under command of evidence, and I would say an average of 2 per module. So that's 2 out of 27 questions, maximum 3 or 4. But that means of the longer questions, there's like 12 of those, probably 2 or so would be graph questions. And some people like to go hunt for those early because they're good at them. Others save them for last because they don't love them. Yeah, good question. If you end up thinking of something that you want to discuss or ask about, feel free to email info@applerouth.com below there, or call that number. That's the main office. I'll leave it for another minute or so to see if anyone has other questions, and if not, we'll call it an evening. Okay. Well, seeing none, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you guys for joining. And like I said, feel free to reach out with questions that come up. Good luck on the SAT and beyond. Thanks so much for joining.